Most of what we know about sales, here I'm not talking about persuasion, influence more broadly, but what we know about sales, comes from a world of information asymmetry, where the seller always had more information than the buyer. When the seller has more information than the seller can rip you off. When the seller, and when I say seller of anything, seller of ideas, seller of concepts, seller of products or services, when the seller has a huge information advantage, the seller can rip you off. When the seller has a huge information advantage, the buyer doesn't have many choices, the buyer doesn't have a way to talk back, the seller can really rip you off. Information asymmetry is why we have the principle of buyer beware. Buyers have to beware because sleazy, slimy, and smarmy have an edge and can rip you off. But here's the thing, you guys know this, but I just want to lock this down because it's a big deal. This is a huge deal, and I just feel like out there the consciousness hasn't fully awakened to how big a deal this is. Do we live in a world of information asymmetry today? Less and less and less and less and less. And this is one of the biggest things that's happened, not only in shopping, not only in buying, not only in customer insights, but in, I think, the entire kind of grammar and logic of business.
You ask millennials what they want to do when they grow older. They say they want to be a good neighbor, I want to be a good citizen, I want to be a well-rounded person. An incredible share of millennials say that, I want to be a well-rounded person. That's exactly what boomers did not want to be, you know? A well-rounded person, just a nice round peg to fit in that institutional hole. You know, we didn't want to do that. But you find millennials saying that, and millennials, when you ask them their favorite way to spend their time, with their family, with their parents. I mean, that's just phenomenal. In fact, we have seen a record share of teens and people in their early 20s reporting that they have no problem with any family member. And in fact, it overlaps with another interesting fact, of course, is this one. The enormous resurgence in multi-generational living in America. This is one of the most hidden, underreported trends in America today. In 1980, when boomers filled that age bracket, 25 to 34, it reached its all-time historical nadir. It was never so low as that year. Believe me, boomers did not want to live with their war hero parents.
But what it really boils down to is that consumers want what they want, when they want it, and they want it immediately on their phone. And they're really driving these moments. And so when we look at the behavior, this really bears itself out. We've seen an increase of 20% in 1 year of mobile share of online sessions. So people are going on their mobile phones more and they're going on their mobile phones more. We've also seen a decrease, an 18% decrease in time spent per visit. They're going on their phones more, but they're also going for shorter times. However, I think what happens with a lot of these stats is that people think, hey, they're going on their phones more and they're doing it for shorter periods of time, they're not getting anything done. But I don't think that's totally true because we're seeing a huge increase in mobile conversion rates. 30% increase in mobile conversion rates year over year. And what that means is that people are going on with a specific intent, whether it's buying new shoes or finding a great restaurant or something like that. They're able to convert on their actions when they go on in these short sessions.
Does your willingness to share data vary across organizations? And fortunately for retailers have one of the higher, or consumers are willing to share data more with retailers pretty much compared to any other organization. Federal government, state government, local government didn't matter. People don't want to share data with them. Thanks, Edward Snowden. Financial service providers, telecom providers, also on the higher side of people having more concern about sharing data with them. But for retailers, people are generally willing to share data. All right, but what kinds of data are they willing to share? Well, data that consumers have already put out there, things they've already shared, they're more willing to share than data that there might be an expectation that it resides with a particular organization.
Experiment, understand, learn about 3D printing because it is game-changing. Sarah, 8 years old, is already using it. Liam is 12, and he's already designing products with it. It's out there, and it will only grow. And I would definitely recommend that you explore it because this is very exciting, and there's still a lot of opportunities in your space, I believe, to capture this market at first hand.
The last one I want to cover with you today before we move into where the future is moving specifically is what we call the multiplier effect. And this is very relevant to all of you here because it impacts the entire sort of omni-channel, multi-channel experience. We often think that new distribution channels are going to subtract from the revenues of existing ones, but history does definitely tell us otherwise. So we look at the example of media, for example. We had radio, and when television came along, the assumption was that radio was going to die a very swift death. Obviously, radio had to adapt, but radio in 2015 still exists. It's in a new form, but it very much exists. When movies came along and the big cinematic experience, a lot of people thought television was going to die. And of course, it didn't. It adapted by understanding what it did well, and movies had a different value proposition. And then, of course, so on and so forth. We had cable, we had recording technologies, we have the internet, we have all the things that have evolved through media. And at each stage gate, there are people who are afraid that that which came before is going to die. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it gets disintermediated, but more often than not, what it does is it doesn't just subtract, it multiplies the revenues of existing businesses by creating a larger ecosystem.